another live Patriots Q&A on Sierra Goodwill here with Evan Lazar. Evan, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. We're counting down the days over here, right? You know, we're inside of a month to week one, I think, today. So that's very good news to me.
It is exciting, and less than a week until those padded practices, so we can start talking some football. As always, drop your questions on Twitter, in the live chat on YouTube. We'll try to get to as many as possible. We're going to start over on Twitter because we got a couple of questions here. And I want to start with Lorenzo's question about Cam Newton. How do you think the addition of Cam Newton will affect N'Keal's production and development this year? And what do you think is their ceiling together and floor?
Well, I think their ceiling is pretty high. You know, what I like about Cam with N'Keal in particular is on top of the fact that he adds that quarterback run element, which hopefully will lead to less press coverage on the outside for the Pats receivers. You know, you have Cam in the pocket, you're not going to be able to play man and turn your back to the quarterback the entire game because he's going to run. Trust me, he'll run and he'll gash you. So the best thing for the Patriots is getting a little bit less press man on the outside, and I think that really helps N'Keal because in college, the college game, it's a spread attack, it's a lot of zone coverages, and they're not a ton of man-to-man, and it takes a lot to kind of alter your sort of approach as a receiver to the man-heavy league in the NFL, especially when you have a quarterback like Tom Brady who sees a ton of man coverage. So I think that's the big thing for N'Keal. The other thing, obviously, is that he's worked with big-body receivers successfully in the past. Guys like Devin Funchess, guys like Kelvin Benjamin, Greg Olsen at tight end. They've all done well with Cam. So all arrows point up, I would say, here for Cam and N'Keal together.
And we have a question here from Ashwin. There was reports that the Patriots were signing tight end Jordan Leggett, and then they didn't pull the trigger as expected. Your thoughts and opinions on why that turned out the way it did?
Well, it sounds to me, and this is sort of loosely confirmed, that it was something injury-related, something to do with his physical, that he did not pass it, and that's why we're, in this position now, and Leggett obviously has to be looking for another opportunity.
And a similar question here on Twitter. Since the team didn't end up signing Leggett, who's a player you can see the Pats signing for either that tight end position or another roster spot?
Well, I really thought that the Patriots would go with more veteran experience at tight end, and they ended up going with a guy like Leggett, who has, I think, a little bit more upside than some of the guys that are over the age of 30. I really thought that they would look for guys that, in particular, could help out these young tight ends, right, and kind of bring them along in the league. So talking about Delaney Walker's, maybe bringing back Dwayne Allen from the past, but they seem to be going in a different direction with it all together and going with more youth at that position and getting some upside in there. So probably somebody that none of us are thinking of, like Jordan Leggett.
Well, another signing for the Patriots, running back Lamar Miller. He missed all of last season, but in 2018 was a 1,000-yard rusher. Michael wants to know, is he instantly the best running back on the Patriots roster?
Well, look, I think a lot of people want to quickly label this signing and have a hot take that he's better than Sony Michel or he's better than Rex Burkhead and Damian Harris and make it about that. But really, at the end of the day, I just wrote a piece and it's up now on CLNS.com. So after you watch us here, go read the piece about how I think that actually this is more about the scheme that the Patriots are thinking of running with Cam Newton than it is about Lamar Miller, because in Houston, remember, Bill O'Brien took the Patriots offense and adapted it to Deshaun Watson, a mobile quarterback. The Patriots are going to do the exact same thing this season, adapting it to Cam. So a lot of the concepts that they ran with Deshaun and Lamar Miller in the backfield, I think can carry over to this Patriots offense with Miller here in New England. The biggest thing there is that 4.34 speed, Sarah. If he can get back to that explosiveness that he had before the ACL tear, that speed in this type of system that they're going to have to run with Cam is a lot different, a lot better suited than somebody like a Damian Harris or a Sony, who are mid 4.5s guys and aren't really known for breakaway speed. So that is intriguing with Miller to have that type of speed at the position, because they really don't have anybody else on the roster that can fly like that.
And we have a question here about Cam Newton's vegan diet. He was asked about that actually a couple times in his first press conference as a Patriot last week. And Doug here is asking about his weight loss and whether or not you think that will affect his power running game, or do you think, hey, he's a vegan, that doesn't really translate to how good of a football player he's going to be?
Yeah, I've actually been told by a couple of different people that Cam's weight isn't down all that much. He's looking about the same as he always has. And you heard Julian Edelman yesterday, Sierra. He is as built as anybody as you'll find. I mean, this guy is massive. He's a tight end playing quarterback, right? And I don't think that there's going to be any concerns about his body holding up in that vein. What's more of a concern with his body, obviously his shoulder is the biggest one, but secondary to that is more soft tissue stuff, right? Like the little bone broken in his foot that he had trying to run in the preseason last year, or injured, I should say. So I think that that's a bigger concern than necessarily him not being strong enough to handle a beating or strong enough to run a power game like they've had him do in the past. But at the end of the day, I really don't think the Patriots are going to use that all that much. Goal line, 4th and 1, that type of situation. And situationally, I should say, short down, red area, then really having that be a vocal point of the offense.
Billy over on Twitter wants to know who you think is going to start at right tackle this season.
It's a good question. I think that's sort of the biggest question mark heading into the season right now. You pretty much know everybody else, where everybody else is going to slot in and how it's all going to work moving forward at other positions. Right tackle is the biggest kind of weakness or, biggest kind of competition, I would say. Can't battle outside a quarterback, of course. So I think that Yodny Kajus certainly has the inside track. If he can show that without any practice time, without any real lead up, that he can be ready to play that position instantly for the Patriots, I think that he'll get his chance to play there. I wouldn't also rule out them bringing in a veteran off the free agents. DeMar Dotson's still out there, Adrian Waddle's still out there, Marshall Newhouse. I know nobody wants to see that, but he actually was a career right tackle that moved over to left tackle last year in Newhouse, and it would be better, I think, suited to play on the right side where he spent most of his career. So something like that, I could see them bringing in a veteran there if Kajust isn't ready right away to play, in week 1.
We have a question here from Ashwin. Any chance the team brings back Steven Goskowski to challenge Rohrwasser in the battle for the starting kicking job?
I think it's really interesting that they are just handing this to Rohrwasser without any competition in camp whatsoever. But I think the thing with the Patriots and the way they're approaching this is that they know they have some options in Nick Folk and Goskowski in free agency right now, that if Rohrwasser is a disaster in camp or a disaster to start the season, they can just bring those guys in and they don't need any kind of build up, right? They don't need any practice time with Cardona and Bailey. They've held for them before. They've snapped for them before. So it's really not a big transition there. So there's no real need to occupy a roster spot right now with another kicker. So my guess is that if there's a disaster, if a month from now they decide, oh shoot, Rohrwasser is really not making it very well right now, then they might bring in one of those veteran guys that they've had in the past.
Another new addition for the Patriots as of late, Michael Jackson, the cornerback that they traded for, because they just needed more depth at cornerback, right? So we have a question here. What do you think Jackson will play?
Well, he played outside corner in college, and that's really where he's sort of penciled in right now to play in the NFL. This is a guy that ran in the mid 4.4s. He's got plenty of speed to play outside corner. He's got a great physicality, great press man technique, and get into people's grills and jam them at the line of scrimmage and crowd them at the top of the releases and at the top of their breaks, That's really what the Patriots love out of their outside corners. Think Gilmore, think J.C. Jackson. That's what their kind of archetype is at that position. And my guess is last year in the draft, they liked Jackson, they liked Jawan Williams. They ended up picking Jawan Williams in the top 50. So there's really no need to go back and take Jackson on day 3. Now the Lions, didn't have a spot for him or didn't want him on the roster. The Patriots swoop in and get a guy that they really liked in the draft a year ago to now add him to the mix at cornerback. I think there is a chance. I know a lot of people have thrown out there on Twitter the chance of him playing a little bit of safety, guarding like in the Patrick Chung role, guarding tight ends, guarding running backs. But I really do think that they have more of a bigger vision for him playing outside corner, along with Jawan for that matter too.
Well, we have a question here about the rookies and their involvement in year 1, listing off guys like Kyle Duggar, Josh Uche, Anthony Jennings, Devin Asiasi, and Dalton Keene. And Your thoughts on whether or not they'll play at least 40 to 50% of the snaps, which we know is a lot higher than average rookies here in New England.
Right. For comparison, last year, Chase Winovich played 30% of the defensive snaps, and that's a rookie that really burst onto the scene, had a fantastic preseason and training camp, and is a fast learner, and he was only able to play 30%. Now, granted, a lot of veterans ahead of him, right? So in a different year, without that veteran depth, without Jamie Collins and Kyle Van Noy in the mix, maybe he does play a little bit more as a rookie than he did a year ago. I think for Uche and Jennings, something like that is pretty realistic. Uche kind of screams to me like he would have a very similar rookie season to what they had with Winnow last year, which is 30% of the snaps, obvious passing situations, come in and rush the passer, right? That I think is a really good role for Uche to carve out. Jennings, I think, will be a little bit more interesting because he's going to play on the line of scrimmage predominantly. He's not going to be an off the line, on the line type of guy. And they're going to have to kind of coach him up in that Van Noy role, which takes a lot of mental capacity and also a lot of just kind of veteran savviness to set the edge. So I don't know if he'll play as much as Uche. I kind of see Uche as a guy that can really scream and explode onto the scene right away.
We have another question from Michael here about the rookies who you think will be the most productive rookie this upcoming season. He says he's got Uche and he doesn't know why you're not as high on him.
I love Uche. I think that he's a really good prospect. I don't know. I can't praise everybody all the time, right? You got to have a little bit of room for some nuance here. But I've always been on the Devin Asiasi train. I'm not going to back off of it right now. I look at the depth chart at tight end. Who's going to play over Asiasi and Keene at this point? I think Asiasi is a little bit more pro ready, a little bit more polished in his route running. He's a little bit more of a complete receiver at this time than Dalton Keene is. So I really think Cam is going to like him. I think they're already building a pretty good rapport and a pretty good friendship off the field as well, training a little bit out on the West Coast before the season, before camp opens. So I think that those two guys are destined for big things here this year.
And we've got a couple questions about this guy before, but do you think the Patriots could make a trade for David Njoku, or has that ship sailed?
Well, Njoku says that ship has sailed, right? He had a meeting with the brass up there in Cleveland, with the head coach and with the general manager when he reported for camp, and they sort of let bygones be bygones and buried the hatchet, it sounds like, and he has revoked his trade request, right? So he's no longer seeking a trade. Now, could Cleveland still trade him if you're blown away by an offer? Absolutely, but I don't see the Patriots that we've talked about in the past era giving up a ton of draft capital now after giving up a bunch to draft two guys in the third round last year in the trade and then actually using the picks on tight ends. I don't see them actually going out and wasting more picks on the tight end position, and I think that's why you saw Leggett and those types of guys be more in the conversation than somebody like Njoku.
Couple safeties that need replacement this season for the Patriots. Jerron Harmon's one of them. We have a question here about his replacement. Who you think will get the majority of the snaps?
Kyle Duggar. I think that Kyle Duggar has a really good chance to carve out that role in that Harmon role in year one. And you look at his tape at Line Orion, that's mostly what he was doing. I know a lot of people want to see him play in the box, play that chung role, guard tight ends, and have that strappy man coverage that we saw at the Senior Bowl. But during his collegiate career, he was playing free safety. He was playing in the deep part of the field, zoning over the top of the field and kind of creating at the catch point, right? Interceptions, pass breakups over the top and providing safety help. I think that he can do that in the Jerron Harmon role, and maybe that's how he gets some on-field snaps as a rookie and how he carves out a role as a rookie as well as hopefully on some punt returns. I really hope they throw him back there as well.
You think Terrence Brooks will fill the void of Patrick Chung?
I think a combination of Brooks and Adrian Phillips, the free agent addition that they had this offseason. I think the nice thing about the Patriots defense and their secondary in particular is that they can mix and match so much with personnel groupings and their depth there that, okay, maybe they don't have one guy that can do all of the things that Patrick Chung could do, but they have a couple of different guys that can fill that spot, and you kind of add them all together to get to Patrick Chung's role last year. So Chung is one of those guys that's been in the system, obviously, for a decade. He's so experienced, he's so knowledgeable inside and out that he can play in the slot, he can play linebacker, he can play safety in a split zone coverage on the deep part of the field. He can play a little bit of robber if they want him to do that. He wears a lot of different hats for this defense. I'm not sure if one person can do that right away, but I think that they can add up to that with a couple of different bodies.
We have questions about Dante Hightower's role, the linebacking position, who's going to fill in that very large void of Hightower there at that position.
There's not one player on this team that can replace Dante Hightower, right? That's the type of guy that you better bring the whole crew to replace a guy like that. So I think initially you'll definitely see Juwan Bentley playing and taking on a much larger leadership role as that middle of the defender, right? That middle linebacker that has the green dot, that is really that impact run defender from the second level. In terms of the pass rush and adding to replacing that type of production from Hightower, playing on the end of the line and rushing the passer, playing in line over the guards and centers, standing up and rushing the passer. That type of stuff, I think, is going to take a couple of different people. It's going to be Winovich. It's going to be Uche. It might be Jennings a little bit. It might be John Simon or Brandon Copeland at times. And those guys together are going to have to add up to one Dante Hightower. And I think the biggest thing is, besides the leadership aspect of it and getting all the troops in order, if you will, it's also mainly the impact of his physicality. Right, his physicality and his tone-setting physicality is a big thing that I think Juwan Bentley is going to have to shoulder that load of replacing.
We have a question here about Jacobi Meyers and whether or not you think he's penciled in as the 3-4 wide receiver this season, or you think he's going to really have to fight for that position over other guys like Jamari Byrd, Jeff Thomas potentially. Your thoughts on Meyers?
I think that he's going to have to fight for a roster spot, quite frankly. There's a lot of receivers in camp this year. I think they have 11 or 12 of them on the roster. And some of them, certainly do a little bit more than Meyers does. Meyers is a slot guy, 100% a slot guy. He's going to play inside. He's decent at that role. He's obviously got quick feet and he's got that separation quickness, but he's not exactly an explosive athlete. You put a guy like a Jeff Thomas in that role, you're adding a completely different element to your offense, a vertical element and a speed element to that position. And then you also have Mohamed Sanu to think about as well. So I think the top three of Sanu, Harry, and Edelman is pretty locked in my opinion. And I think Sanu, obviously we've seen it with the offseason training videos and all that kind of stuff, is really locked in this year and is going to be a much better player for New England than he was down the stretch a year ago. So I think those three are kind of the top three. Then you have Meyers, you have Gunner, you have Jeff Thomas, you have a bunch of bodies there behind that. Damari Byrd, obviously, competing for 2 or 3 roster spots. It's going to be a fun camp battle.
And Friday was a very busy day for us as Patriots reporters. We got to hear from pretty much every assistant positional coach, coordinator on the Patriots, as well as the quarterbacks and Bill Belichick. But we have a question here about the coaches, particularly new coaches. Have any of them stood out to you as being really impressive, or that you're excited to see their impact on the Patriots this season? Oh, yeah.
Jed Fish, 100%, the new quarterbacks coach. I've been singing his praises all offseason. Biggest reason why is, listen, I love Josh McDaniels. I'm a McDaniels truther. I think he's a really good offensive coordinator and a really good designer of scheme and play caller. But everybody needs some fresh ideas, right? Every once in a while, you need to have some fresh new innovations to your offense. And Jed Fish comes with a long resume of offensive football, both in the college game and in the pro game, working for the Shanahans, working for Sean McVay in Los Angeles, working at UCLA as the offensive coordinator. There's a lot of different things going on there, right? So I think the biggest thing is with Jed Fish is that along with working with the quarterback specifically, he can come in and bring some new flavor to this offense, which I think is desperately needed.
N'Keal Harry's back in our live chat once again, an avid viewer of our Q&As. And Michael wants to know, bigger red zone threat, N'Keal Harry or Devin Asiasi? Be careful because he might be listening.
I would say, listen, it's a good question. I think that N'Keal has all the tools to be a great red zone threat, whether it's in contested catches. I hate the fade ball, but if you want to throw him the fade ball, you can obviously do that. I think it's a low percentage throw, but they love to do it anyways at times. I think the fade ball is there for him, but I really think it's the versatility that the Patriots will hopefully be able to tap into a little bit more this season, right? Moving him around the formation, getting him to have kind of pre-snap motion type things where he's already moving when the ball is snapped. We saw it a little bit last year. They had some of those play designs in there. The one against Kansas City is sort of the big one where he should have scored and it was called out of bounds by the referees. Plays like that, I think, is what we're going to look for out of N'Keal Harry a lot more this year.
A couple more questions here before we wrap up. Do you think Harry will get kick return duties, or is he strictly a wide receiver at this point on the roster?
Yeah, he returned punts a little bit in college, and it was mostly just we need to play, and Nikhil's our best ball carrier on the team, so we're just going to throw him back there. We're down a couple touchdowns. We needed a momentum changer. Let's put Nikhil back there and see if he can return one. And that did happen a couple of times for him in college. That one against, I think it was USC, where he reverses the field and goes up the sideline was sort of the highlight that everybody stuck to when they said, oh, Nikhil can return punts also. That's cool. So I don't know if he's going to go back there too often, though, but I would love to see the Patriots add some juice to that return spot and not go with a guy like a Brandon Bolden who's just going to protect the football and get the 25 yards and kind of go along your day. I'd love to see them get somebody like they had with Cordell Patterson that can impact the game from the return game. Maybe a guy like a Damari Bird, maybe Jeff Thomas, if he makes the roster, can add some explosiveness to the kick return game.
We have a question here about the red zone woes that the Patriots experienced last season. Not so much getting to the red zone, but finishing and scoring touchdowns. Do you think they'll be better in terms of production in the red area this season?
Yeah, well, listen, it's one of those things in the red zone where I truly think that Cam Newton can be a big-time X factor now, because now you're playing 11 on 11 with the quarterback running the football. Obviously, in short yardage situations, he's been one of the better short yardage running backs, ball carriers in a long time in the NFL over the last decade, certainly. So having that element now, I think, does open up a lot more creativity, a lot more scheme to Josh McDaniels, where with Brady, it's, you go three wide, you run a couple of different route combinations on both sides, and you hope somebody gets open, right? And that sort of offense sometimes can get bogged down in the red zone if you don't have individual playmakers and you don't have that precise execution that we've seen in the past out of the Patriots offense in the red area. So you don't have a Gronk, you don't have guys that like Edelman all over the field that can create that separation in the short area, and that's when you lead to some red zone struggles. So hopefully this year they'll be able to use scheme and kind of more of a smoke and mirror deception a little bit with Cam Newton to open up some opportunities for some guys down there.
Well, that will do it for another live Patriots Q&A. Thanks so much for tuning in. I tried to get all your questions. They were flooding in at some point. So if I missed you, come back on Friday. Drop them in the live chat at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be back here, same time, same place. And in the meantime, we'll have plenty of Patriots content for you on our website at clnsmedia.com and on our YouTube channel at Patriots Press Pass. So don't forget to subscribe to us there. We'll see you on Friday.